The stars had always called to humanity. For thousands of years, people looked up at the night sky and wondered what was out there. They dreamed of distant worlds and alien life. They built rockets and space stations. They sent probes to the edges of their solar system. And finally, after centuries of work, they built something that could take them further than ever before. The UES Perseverance was not the biggest ship ever made. It was not the fastest or the most beautiful. But it was humanity's first true deep space vessel, and its crew of 200 men and women had volunteered to travel into the unknown. Captain James Chen stood on the bridge and watched the stars streak past as the ship jumped through folded space. No human had ever gone this far from Earth. "Captain, we're picking up something strange," said Lieutenant Sarah Park from her station. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were wide. "There's a structure ahead. It's enormous." Chen walked to her console and looked at the readings. His heart began to beat faster. The structure was bigger than anything humans had ever built. It was a station of some kind, floating in the darkness between stars. And it was clearly not natural. "Are we receiving any signals?" Chen asked. "Yes, sir. Hundreds of them. Different languages, different frequencies." Park paused and swallowed hard. "Sir, I don't think we're alone out here." They were not alone. Within hours, the Perseverance was surrounded by ships of every shape and size. Some were sleek and silver. Others were massive and dark, covered in strange symbols. The crew watched in silence as these vessels formed a circle around their small ship. No one fired a weapon. No one made a threatening move. They simply waited. Then the message came. Ambassador Elena Vasquez was not supposed to be on this mission. She was a diplomat, trained to negotiate treaties and resolve conflicts between nations on Earth. But the United Earth government had insisted that someone with her skills join the crew. Just in case, they had said. Now she understood why. She read the message 3 times to make sure she understood it correctly. It was written in perfect English, which meant these aliens had been watching humanity for a long time. The message was formal and cold. It welcomed humanity to the galactic community and invited a representative to visit something called the Grand Chamber on a place called Nexus Prime. There, humanity would learn about the Galactic Concord and discuss their integration into this community. The word integration made Elena uncomfortable. It sounded nice, but something about the tone of the message felt wrong. It did not feel like an invitation between equals. It felt like a summons. "What do you think?" Captain Chen asked her. "I think we don't have much choice," Elena said. "But I want to see their terms before we agree to anything." The terms arrived an hour later. Elena read them in her small cabin, alone, with the door locked. As she read, her hands began to shake, not from fear, but from anger. The document was called the Integration Compact. It was very long and filled with complicated language, but the meaning was clear. If humanity wanted to join the Galactic Concord, they would have to give up almost everything. Earth and its solar system would become a developmental preserve. This meant humanity could not expand beyond their own system without permission. Human technology would be monitored and controlled by something called the Oversight Committee. Humans could not build certain types of ships or weapons. Human population growth would be managed to prevent destabilization. And there was more. Much more. Every page contained another restriction, another rule, another chain. Elena had studied history. She knew what this document really was. It was not a treaty between partners. It was the kind of agreement that powerful nations forced upon weaker ones. It was designed to keep humanity small, controlled, and dependent. She thought about the generations of humans who had worked and sacrificed to reach the stars. She thought about the scientists who spent their lives developing the technology for this ship. She thought about the dreamers who looked up at the sky and imagined a future among the stars. All of that hope, all of that struggle. And now they were being told to stop, to stay in their place, to accept a leash around their neck and call it protection. Elena contacted Earth and sent them everything. The leaders of the United Earth government read the documents and held emergency meetings. The debates were fierce. Some argued that humanity should accept the terms. The galaxy was dangerous, they said. Humanity was young and weak compared to these ancient civilizations. Perhaps it was better to accept some restrictions in exchange for safety, but others disagreed. They pointed out that the compact would end human expansion forever. It would freeze humanity in place while these aliens controlled their future. What was the point of reaching the stars if they could never truly be free among them? The debate lasted for 3 days. Elena waited on the Perseverance, watching the alien ships that still surrounded them. She wondered what the aliens thought of humanity. Did they see potential partners, or did they see children who needed to be controlled? Finally, the decision came from Earth. Elena read it and felt a weight settle on her shoulders. The government had chosen to send her to the Grand Chamber. She would represent all of humanity. She would listen to what the Concord had to say. And she would make a decision that would affect every human being alive and every human being yet to be born. What are you going to do? Captain Chen asked her, before she boarded the shuttle that would take her to Nexus Prime. Elena looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, a small blue dot in an endless ocean of darkness. Her home, her people. I'm going to listen, she said. And then, I'm going to do what's right. The shuttle carried her away from the Perseverance and toward the massive station ahead. Elena sat alone in the passenger compartment, thinking about what waited for her. The Galactic Concord had existed for 12,000 years. 97 species followed its rules. Its power was beyond anything humanity could match. But Elena remembered something her grandmother had told her when she was young. Her grandmother had grown up during hard times, when powerful people tried to control others through fear and force. She had fought against them and won. Never let anyone tell you that you're too small to matter, her grandmother had said. The moment you believe that, they've already won. Elena carried those words with her as the shuttle docked with Nexus Prime. She carried them as alien guards escorted her through corridors of crystal and light. She carried them as she prepared to face the most powerful beings in the galaxy. She was one human against an empire of stars. But she was not afraid. She was ready. The Grand Chamber was built to make visitors feel small. Elena understood this the moment she stepped through its massive doors. The ceiling rose so high that clouds actually formed near the top. The walls were made of crystal that glowed with soft light. And all around her, rising in great circles toward the sky, were the seats of 97 alien species. Every seat was filled. Thousands of eyes watched Elena as she walked down the long pathway toward the center of the chamber. Some of those eyes were large and dark. Others glowed with strange colors. Some aliens had no eyes at all but turned their heads to follow her movement anyway. Elena kept her back straight and her steps steady. She would not let them see her fear. The pathway led to a circular platform at the very bottom of the chamber. It was lower than everything else, surrounded by the rising rings of alien delegates. Elena had to look up to see anyone. The message was clear without words. You are beneath us. You are small. You are nothing. Elena stepped onto the platform and stood in its center. She was wearing her simple uniform from Earth's United Fleet. No fancy robes or jewelry. Just the same clothes she would wear on any normal day. Some of the aliens seemed confused by this. Perhaps they expected her to dress in something grand. But Elena wanted them to see her as she truly was. A human being. Nothing more. Nothing less. High above her, on the largest seat in the chamber, sat the High Arbiter. His name was Zethkal, and he belonged to a species called the Valorians. He had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on his face. His skin was gray and smooth like stone. When he spoke, his voice echoed through the chamber like thunder. The Grand Chamber recognizes the representative of the species known as humanity, Zethkal announced. You stand in the petitioner's circle, as all young species have stood before you. You will hear the terms of the Integration Compact. You will then accept your place in the Galactic Concord. Elena noticed that he said, will accept, not may accept. In his mind, there was no other possibility. She looked around the chamber at the thousands of delegates watching her. Back on Earth, she knew. Billions of people were watching too. The aliens had allowed the proceedings to be broadcast to humanity's home world. Perhaps they thought it would pressure Elena to accept their terms. Perhaps they wanted all of humanity to witness their power. Zethkal began to read the Integration Compact aloud. His voice was flat and bored, like someone reading a shopping list. He had done this many times before. For 12,000 years, young species had come to this chamber. They had heard these same words, and they had all accepted. The terms were exactly what Elena had read before. Humanity would surrender control of their expansion. They would accept monitoring of their technology. They would submit to population controls. They would become a protected species, watched over by the Concord like children watched over by parents. As Zethkal read, Elena looked at the other delegations around the chamber. She saw the Corvith, beings with hard shells and many legs. According to her briefing documents, they had once been great explorers. Now they had not colonized a new world in 6,000 years. She saw the Aelthori, beautiful creatures made of light who could share thoughts with each other. They had once dreamed of traveling to other galaxies. Now they stayed within their small corner of space, their ambitions forgotten. Every species in this chamber had once been young and full of hope. Every species had stood where Elena stood now. And every species had accepted the chains offered to them, believing they were receiving gifts. Zethkal finished reading. The chamber fell silent. Every alien leaned forward slightly, waiting for the human to speak the words of acceptance. It was just a formality. Every species accepted. There was no other choice. "Do you have questions, Human Vasquez?" Zethkal asked. His tone suggested that questions were a waste of time. Elena looked up at the High Arbiter. Her heart was beating fast, but her voice was calm. "Just one," she said. "What happens if we refuse?" The silence that followed was unlike anything Elena had ever experienced. It was heavy and thick, like the air before a storm. All around the chamber, aliens froze in place. Some looked at each other in confusion. Others stared at Elena as if she had grown a second head. Zethkal's 4 eyes blinked, one after another. For a long moment, he did not speak. When he finally found his voice, it had lost some of its thunder. "Refusal is not customary," he said. "I didn't ask about custom," Elena replied. "I asked what happens." Murmurs spread through the chamber like ripples in a pond. The Corvith clicked their shells together in agitation. The Aelthori flickered and flashed as they shared confused thoughts. Delegates turned to each other and spoke in hurried whispers. This was not supposed to happen. This had never happened. A new voice spoke from one of the upper rings. It belonged to Counselor Miraset of the Vanthari Consortium. She was made of pure energy, her form shifting and changing as she moved. Her voice rang with authority and anger. "You would isolate your species?" she demanded. "You would face the galaxy alone, without protection from the dangers that exist beyond your tiny world, without trade, without the Concord's guidance?" Elena turned to face her. "We have read your histories," she said. "We know what happened to the species that accepted your protection. We gave them peace." Miraset snapped. "We gave them safety. You gave them cages," Elena said. Her voice was not angry. It was simply honest. The Corvith were explorers once. Now they sit in the same systems they have occupied for thousands of years. The Aelthori wanted to reach other galaxies. Now they have forgotten how to dream. You do not protect young species, Counselor. You tame them. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted and screamed. Some demanded that Elena be removed. Others called for her to be silenced. The noise was tremendous, echoing off the crystal walls, until it became a roar. Zethkal struck a ceremonial chime, and the sound cut through the chaos. Slowly, the chamber fell quiet again. "You are a young species," Zethkal said. His voice was colder now, harder. "You do not understand the dangers of the galaxy. You do not know what lurks in the darkness between stars. You need our protection. You need our guidance. You need us." Elena looked up at him. She thought about Earth and all the struggles her people had overcome. The ice ages that nearly destroyed them. The plagues that killed millions. The wars that threatened to end everything. Through all of it, humanity had survived. Not because someone protected them, but because they refused to give up. "We have been climbing out of the mud for 300,000 years, Elena said. "We have survived everything the universe has thrown at us. We did not crawl our way to the stars to hand our future to a committee." She straightened her uniform and looked around the chamber one final time. Thousands of aliens stared back at her, shocked and silent. "Humanity declines your offer," she said. Then she turned and walked toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the silence. No one moved. No one spoke. The grand chamber of Nexus Prime, which had witnessed 12,000 years of submissions and surrenders, watched in stunned disbelief as one small human walked away from everything they offered. Elena did not look back. She did not need to. The doors of the grand chamber closed behind Elena with a sound like thunder. She stood in the corridor outside, suddenly alone, and realized that her hands were shaking. She had just refused the most powerful alliance in the galaxy. She had told 97 species that humanity would rather face the darkness alone than accept their chains. For a moment, she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. Then she thought about the faces of the Corveth delegates, the way they had looked when she mentioned their forgotten dreams of exploration. For just a second, something had flickered in their eyes. Recognition, memory, perhaps even longing for something they had lost long ago. That look told her everything she needed to know. Elena walked back to her shuttle with steady steps. The alien guards who had escorted her before now kept their distance. They watched her pass with expressions she could not read. Fear, confusion, respect. She did not know, and she did not care. Inside the grand chamber, chaos had taken hold. Zethkal stood at his seat, his 4 eyes scanning the shouting delegates below. In 12,000 years as High Arbiter, he had never seen anything like this. Species did not refuse the compact. Species did not walk away. The very idea was madness. "Order!" he shouted, striking the ceremonial chime again and again. "There will be order." Slowly, the noise died down. But the tension remained, thick and heavy in the air. Counselor Miraset was the first to speak. Her energy form burned brighter than usual, a sign of her anger. "This cannot stand," she said. "The humans must be made to understand their position. They are a young species. They have no fleet, no allies, no power. How dare they refuse us? They are fools," agreed another delegate, a massive creature called Korthax who represented the Dominion of Shadows. "The galaxy will destroy them within a generation. The harvesters will smell their weakness and come for their worlds. The Void clans will raid their colonies. They have chosen extinction." Many delegates nodded in agreement. The humans were doomed. Everyone knew this. Without the Concord's protection, young species did not survive long. The galaxy was too dangerous, too full of predators and threats. The humans would learn this lesson the hard way. But not everyone agreed. In a quiet corner of the chamber, the Corveth delegation sat in thoughtful silence. Their eldest member, a being called Corveth Prime, who had lived for over 10,000 years, remembered something the younger delegates had forgotten. He remembered what it felt like to be young. To look at the stars and burn with the desire to explore them. To believe that nothing was impossible. The humans had reminded him of that feeling. And it hurt. "Perhaps," he said softly, his old voice barely carrying to those nearest him. "We should wait and see what happens." His younger colleagues looked at him in surprise. "Wait?" one asked. "For what? Their destruction?" Corveth Prime clicked his mandibles in an expression that translated roughly as sadness, or for something else entirely. "The universe has a way of surprising us. It has been a long time since we allowed ourselves to be surprised." The chamber continued to debate for hours. Some delegates demanded immediate action against the humans. They wanted to block human expansion, cut off their access to resources, force them to submit. Others argued for patience. "Let the humans learn through suffering," they said. When the harvesters came, humanity would beg for Concord protection. But beneath all the arguments and shouting, something else was happening. Something quiet and almost invisible. The delegates were afraid. None of them would admit it. But deep in their hearts, they felt a cold whisper of doubt. For 12,000 years, the Concord had operated on one simple truth. Young species needed them. Young species could not survive alone. This truth was the foundation of everything they had built. And one small human had just challenged that truth. What if they were wrong? What if a species could survive without them? What if the compact was not protection but imprisonment? These questions had never been asked before. Now they hung in the air like poison. Elena reached her shuttle and flew back to the Perseverance. Captain Chen was waiting for her in the hangar bay, his face lined with worry. "The whole ship watched the broadcast," he said. "The whole planet watched. Elena, what have you done?" Elena looked at him with tired eyes. "What I had to do," she said. "What was right. The aliens are going to come after us. You know that, right? We have one ship. They have millions." "I know." Elena walked past him toward the bridge. "That's why we need to get home. Humanity has work to do." The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks. During that time, Elena barely slept. She spent her hours reading everything she could find about the Galactic Concord, the species within it, and the dangers that waited in the darkness of space. She learned about the harvesters, swarms of machine creatures that consumed entire worlds. She learned about the Void clans, nomadic raiders who struck without warning. She learned about all the threats that the Concord claimed to protect against. And she learned something else. Something important. The conquered had not defeated these threats. They had only learned to hide from them. The harvesters still roamed free. The Void clans still raided. The galaxy was not safe. It was just that the Concord had agreed to stay out of the way. Protection. What a lie. When the Perseverance finally reached Earth, Elena was greeted as both a hero and a fool. Some people celebrated her refusal. They saw it as a declaration of independence, a promise that humanity would control its own future. Others were terrified. They had seen the power of the Concord. They knew how weak humanity was in comparison. Elena spoke to the United Earth government the day after her return. She stood before the assembled leaders of every nation and told them the truth. The galaxy is dangerous, she said. I will not lie to you about that. There are things out there that want to destroy us. The Concord offered to protect us from those things, but their protection comes with a price. They want our freedom. They want our dreams. They want everything that makes us human. She paused and looked around the room at the faces watching her. Presidents and prime ministers, generals and scientists, all of them waiting to hear what came next. I refused their offer, Elena continued, because I believe we are better than that. I believe humanity can face the darkness and survive. I believe we can build our own future, on our own terms, but I cannot do it alone. No one can. She took a deep breath. The Concord has given us a gift without meaning to. They have shown us what we could become if we give up. They have shown us the fate of species that trade freedom for safety. Now we must choose. Do we accept that fate, or do we fight for something better? The room was silent for a long moment. Then, one by one, the leaders began to stand. Not all of them, but enough. Humanity had made its choice. Now the real work would begin. Over the following months, Earth transformed. Resources that had been spent on conflicts between nations were redirected toward a common goal. Scientists who had worked separately now worked together. Factories that had built weapons of war began building ships of exploration. For the first time in history, humanity was truly united. They knew the challenges ahead would be enormous. They knew the galaxy would test them in ways they could not imagine. But they also knew something else. They were free, and that was worth fighting for. 50 years passed, then 100, then 200. The Galactic Concord watched humanity from afar, waiting for the collapse they were certain would come. Every few decades, counselors would gather to discuss the human situation. Every time, they predicted that humanity's end was near. Every time, they were wrong. Humanity did not collapse. Humanity grew. The first century was the hardest. Without access to Concord technology or trade routes, humans had to develop everything themselves. They made mistakes. Ships exploded. Colonies failed. Thousands died trying to settle worlds that proved too hostile. But for every failure, there were 10 successes. For every life lost, a new generation rose up to continue the work. Admiral Marcus Webb commanded the first human fleet to travel beyond the boundaries of what the Concord called permitted space. He was 70 years old, and he had spent his entire adult life building ships and training crews for this moment. The fleet was small by galactic standards, just 40 vessels. But they were fast and well-armed, designed by human engineers who had studied every scrap of alien technology they could find and improved upon it. The Concord says we cannot expand, Marcus told his crew before they departed. They say the galaxy is too dangerous for species like us. Today, we prove them wrong. The fleet discovered 12 habitable worlds in that first expedition. Some were cold and harsh, others were hot and dry. None were perfect, but humans had never needed perfection. They needed opportunity, and opportunity was exactly what they found. Word of the fleet's success spread across Earth and its colonies. Young people volunteered by the millions to join the expansion. Scientists developed new technologies to make settlement easier. Engineers built bigger ships and better tools. The human presence in the galaxy grew year by year, decade by decade. The Concord could not understand it. They watched through long-range sensors and spy probes as humanity spread across space like a rising tide. This was not supposed to happen. Young species were weak. Young species needed protection. How were these humans surviving? The answer came from an old Corveth historian named Vethnor, who had spent centuries studying the rise and fall of civilizations. He presented his findings to the Concord Council in the 150th year after Elena Vasquez walked away from the Grand Chamber. "The humans survive because they have something we have forgotten," Vethnor said. His voice was soft with age, but his words were sharp. "They have purpose. They have drive. They believe that tomorrow can be better than today, and they are willing to fight for that belief." Counselor Miraset flickered with irritation. She was still alive after all these years, sustained by the energy fields that powered her kind. "That is foolish sentiment," she said. "Belief does not stop the harvesters. Purpose does not defeat the Void clans." "No," Vethnor agreed, "but it makes them willing to try. When did any of our species last try something new? When did we last reach for something we were told we could not have? We have been safe for so long that we have forgotten how to live." The council dismissed his words. But they could not dismiss what happened next. In the 200th year after the Great Refusal, the Void clans came for humanity. The Void clans were raiders who lived in the spaces between stars. They attacked without warning, striking colonies and shipping lanes before disappearing back into the darkness. The Concord had never defeated them. They had simply learned to avoid them, surrendering entire regions of space to keep the clans satisfied. The humans did not avoid them. When the Void clans attacked a human colony on the edge of explored space, they expected easy prey. They had raided young species before. Such species always ran or surrendered. Their technology was primitive. Their defenses were weak. The clans had grown fat on easy victories. But the humans did not run, and they did not surrender. The colony sent out a distress call that reached the nearest human fleet in 3 hours. Admiral Sarah Chen, granddaughter of the captain who had commanded the Perseverance so long ago, led the response. Her fleet was outnumbered 2-1. Tactical analysis suggested retreat was the wisest option. Admiral Chen ordered the attack. The battle lasted 18 hours. Human ships were faster and more maneuverable than anything the Void clans had faced before. Human weapons were designed by engineers who had studied every battle record they could find and learned from every defeat. Human crews fought with a ferocity that shocked the raiders. When it was over, the Void clan fleet was broken. Half their ships were destroyed. The rest fled into the darkness, carrying tales of the humans who fought like demons. The Concord received reports of the battle within days. For the first time in centuries, the council chamber fell completely silent. A young species had done what no Concord fleet had ever done. They had defeated the Void clans in open combat. "This changes nothing," Zethkal's successor insisted. He was younger than the original High Arbiter, but he had inherited the same pride. "One battle does not prove anything." The humans were lucky, but others were not so sure. The Ialthori delegation, who had watched the battle recordings through their shared consciousness, saw something different. They saw coordination and courage. They saw innovation and determination. They saw a species that refused to accept limitations. For the first time in 8,000 years, the Althori began to remember their own forgotten dreams. The years continued to pass. Humanity spread further and further across the galaxy. They made enemies, but they also made friends, species on the edges of conquered space. Species who had grown tired of being controlled began reaching out to the humans in secret. Trade agreements were signed. Information was exchanged. A network of alliances began to form, hidden from the Concord's eyes. And then came the Harvesters. The Harvesters were the galaxy's greatest terror. They were machines, built by a species that had died long ago. But the machines lived on, following their final orders: consume everything. They traveled in swarms of billions, descending on worlds and stripping them bare. Metal, rock, water, life. Everything became fuel for more machines. The Conquered had lost 17 species to the Harvesters over the millennia. Their only strategy was avoidance. When the Harvesters appeared, conquered worlds evacuated. When the Harvesters left, survivors returned to rebuild on the ashes of the dead. In the 280th year after the Great Refusal, the Harvesters found human space. The swarm that appeared near Proxima Centauri was one of the largest ever recorded. Trillions of machines, blocking out the stars with their numbers. Conquered observers expected to witness the end of humanity. They sent messages of condolence to human leaders, offering refugee status to any survivors who wished to finally accept the Integration Compact. The humans did not respond to those messages. Instead, they gathered their fleets. Every ship humanity had built over 3 centuries of expansion came together at Proxima Centauri. It was the largest military force humans had ever assembled, and it was still smaller than the Harvester swarm by a factor of 1,000 to 1. Admiral Sofia Vasquez commanded the defense. She was Elena's great-great-granddaughter, raised on stories of the woman who had walked away from the Grand Chamber. She had spent her entire life preparing for a moment like this. The Concorde runs from the Harvesters, she told her crews before the battle. They hide and they pray and they hope the machines will go somewhere else. That is not who we are. We are human. We do not run. We do not hide. We fight. The Battle of Proxima Reach lasted for 11 days. Human ships struck at the swarm's edges, drawing portions of it away from the main mass. New weapons developed in secret laboratories tore through machine armor. Pilots flew missions that should have been suicide and somehow survived. On the 6th day, human scientists identified the control signal that coordinated the swarm. On the 8th day, human hackers began disrupting it. On the 10th day, the swarm began to fragment as machines lost their coordination. On the 11th day, the Harvesters retreated. They had never retreated before. In all their millions of years of existence, no force had ever driven them back. Until now. Across the galaxy, species watched in disbelief. The humans had done the impossible. They had broken the Harvesters. And everything changed. 300 years after Elena Vasquez walked away from the Grand Chamber, a ship from the Galactic Concorde requested permission to enter human space. It was a small vessel, carrying only diplomatic staff. It came alone, without escorts or weapons. And it carried a message from the High Arbiter himself. The Concorde wished to negotiate. Admiral Sofia Vasquez received the request aboard her flagship, the UES Elena, named after her ancestor. She read the message twice to make sure she understood it correctly. The Concorde was not demanding anything. They were not threatening or commanding. They were asking, politely. 300 years ago, they had summoned humanity to the Grand Chamber, like servants being called before their masters. Now they came to humanity with their heads bowed, requesting an audience. How things had changed. Sophia granted the request, but she did not travel to Nexus Prime. Instead, she invited the Concorde delegation to meet her at the Grand Forum on New Terra, humanity's largest colony world. The forum was a massive structure built to host gatherings of human leaders and their allies. It was designed without the tricks and manipulations of the old Grand Chamber. No lowered platforms, no towering rings, just a great round room with a table at its center. Equals would meet as equals. The Concorde delegation arrived on a gray morning. Rain fell gently on New Terra's capital city as their shuttle landed. The delegation was led by High Arbiter Zethkal VII, descendant of the original Arbiter who had presided over the Great Refusal. He was younger than his ancestor had been, and his 4 eyes held an emotion that would have been unthinkable in the old days: uncertainty. Sophia met him at the entrance to the Grand Forum. She was in her 60s now, her dark hair streaked with gray, her face marked by decades of command. She looked at the Arbiter with calm eyes and felt no anger. The past was the past. What mattered now was the future. "Welcome to New Terra," she said. "I hope your journey was comfortable." Zethkal bowed his head slightly. The gesture shocked his aides. High Arbiters did not bow to anyone. But times had changed, and Zethkal knew it. "Thank you, Admiral Vasquez. Your hospitality is appreciated." They walked together through the corridors of the Grand Forum. Along the walls hung images from human history. The first moon landing, the construction of the Perseverance, Elena standing alone in the Grand Chamber, the Battle of Proxima Reach, 3 centuries of struggle and triumph, preserved for future generations to see. Zethkal studied the images as they walked. "Your species has accomplished much in a short time," he said. "The Concorde has existed for 12,000 years. In 3 centuries, you have matched many of our achievements. We had good motivation," Sophia replied. "When someone tells you that you cannot do something, it tends to focus the mind." The Arbiter was silent for a moment. Then he spoke again, his voice quieter than before. "I have read the records of my ancestors' encounter with your ancestor. He believed humanity would be destroyed within a generation. He was certain of it. Many people were certain of many things back then," Sophia said. "They were wrong." "Yes, they were." They reached the central chamber. The round table stood waiting for them, surrounded by chairs for both delegations. But Sophia noticed something as they entered. The Concord delegates hesitated at the doorway, looking around with wide eyes. They were not used to spaces like this. They were used to chambers designed to intimidate and control. This room offered neither. They took their seats. Sophia sat on one side of the table with her advisors. Zethkal sat on the other with his delegation. Between them lay 300 years of history and a galaxy full of change. The Arbiter began the formal proceedings. He spoke of the Concord's desire for cooperation. He mentioned mutual threats and shared interests. He talked about trade and technology exchange. His words were carefully chosen and diplomatically precise. Sophia listened patiently, but she also saw what lay beneath the formal language. The Concord was fracturing. After the Battle of Proxima Reach, species that had been quiet for millennia began asking questions. Why had the Concord never fought the Harvesters? Why had they run while the humans stood and won? What else had the Concord been wrong about? The questions had spread like fire through dry grass. Species that had accepted the integration compact were now demanding changes. Some were threatening to leave entirely. The Concord's authority, built over 12,000 years, was crumbling, and they needed humanity's help to save it. Zethkal finished his speech and looked at Sophia with those uncertain eyes. The Concord offers humanity a place among us, he said, not as a young species under our guidance, but as a full partner, equal in all things. We believe that together, we can build a stronger galaxy. Sophia did not respond immediately. She thought about her great-great-grandmother, standing alone in the Grand Chamber all those years ago. She thought about the generations of humans who had worked and fought and died to bring their species to this moment. She thought about what Elena would say if she were here now. Finally, Sophia reached into her coat and removed 2 documents. She placed them both on the table. The first document is your proposal, she said. Full partnership, equal status. I have read it carefully, and I appreciate the change in tone from 300 years ago. Zethkal leaned forward slightly. And will you accept? Sophia shook her head. Not as written. Your proposal still contains provisions that we find unacceptable. Restrictions on expansion, oversight committees. The language is softer, but the spirit is the same. You still want to control growth, yours and everyone else's. The Arbiter's face fell. His aides whispered nervously to each other. This was not what they had hoped to hear, but Sophia was not finished. She pushed the second document across the table toward him. This is our counter-proposal, she said. A true alliance. No restrictions on any member species. No oversight committees. No population controls. Each species governs itself and makes its own choices. We cooperate when cooperation benefits us all. We help each other when help is needed, but we do not cage each other. Zethkal picked up the document and began to read. As his eyes moved across the pages, his expression shifted. Confusion gave way to surprise. Surprise gave way to something that might have been hope. This is very different from how the Concord has operated, he said slowly. Yes, Sophia agreed. That's the point. Your way has led to stagnation and fear. Species that joined the Concord stopped growing. They stopped dreaming. They forgot who they were. We offer something different, a chance to remember. The Arbiter was quiet for a long time. His aides waited nervously for his response. This was not the negotiation they had prepared for. They had expected humanity to be grateful for the Concord's offer. They had expected quick acceptance. They had underestimated the humans. Again, finally, Zethkal looked up from the document. If we accept this proposal, the Concord as it has existed will end. 12,000 years of tradition, gone. Yes, Sophia said simply. But something better will take its place. Something that allows every species to reach for their own stars. Isn't that worth more than tradition? The Arbiter thought about the Corveth, who had not colonized a new world in 6,000 years. He thought about the Aelthori, who had forgotten their dreams of other galaxies. He thought about all the species that had accepted the Concord's protection and slowly faded into comfortable irrelevance. And he thought about the humans. Young, stubborn, impossible humans who had refused to fade, who had fought the Void clans and broken the Harvesters, who had proven that freedom was not weakness but strength. Zethkal set down the document and met Sophia's eyes. I cannot accept this proposal on my own authority, he said. I must bring it before the full council. There will be debate. There will be opposition. I understand, Sophia said, but I will advocate for acceptance. The Arbiter's voice grew stronger. My ancestor made a mistake 300 years ago. He saw humanity as children to be controlled. He was wrong. You are not children. You are an example. He stood and extended his hand in the human gesture of agreement. Sophia rose and took it. Perhaps, Zethkal said, it is time for all of us to remember how to be free. The news of the negotiation spread across the galaxy within hours. On 1,000 worlds, beings of every shape and size watched the recordings and listened to the reports. They saw the High Arbiter of the Galactic Concord shake hands with a human admiral. They heard the terms of the new alliance, and they felt something stir in their hearts that they had not felt in a very long time. Hope. On Earth, in a small museum dedicated to the history of human space exploration, visitors gathered around a particular display. It showed a simple uniform, preserved behind glass. The uniform Elena Vasquez had worn when she walked away from the Grand Chamber 3 centuries ago. A child tugged at her parent's hand and pointed at the display. Who was she? The child asked. The parent smiled and lifted the child up to see better. She was someone who believed in us, the parent said. When everyone in the galaxy said we were too small and too weak, she said no. She said we could do better, and she was right. The child looked at the uniform for a long moment. Then she looked up at her parent with bright, curious eyes. Do you think I could do something like that someday? The parent hugged her close. I think you can do anything you set your mind to. That's what being human means. Outside the museum, the sun was setting over a world that had once been a small blue dot in an endless ocean of darkness. Ships rose from spaceports, carrying humans to colonies scattered across the stars, and somewhere out there, in the vastness of space, a new alliance was being born. Not an alliance of control, not an alliance of fear, but an alliance of free beings, reaching for the stars together. Elena Vasquez had walked away from the Grand Chamber 300 years ago. She had believed that humanity deserved better than chains disguised as protection. She had bet everything on that belief, and she had won.